For another episode of the Wealth Cafe. I am so excited for today's guest. We are joined by the incredible Randi Braun. If you don't know her, I'll give you a little background. She is Wall Street Journal bestselling author of Something Major. Have it right here. Woo-hoo! We'll be diving into all about this book today, and it is called, as I said, Something Major, the new playbook for women at work. She is also a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. She is the CEO and founder of a women's leadership firm, Something Major, and she is a highly regarded speaker and ICF certified executive coach, and she has worked with nearly 100 organizations. That's incredible. She is an expert at helping high-performing women thrive in demanding roles. Her insights on women's leadership have been featured on CNBC, The Washington Post, Forbes, where she writes her own byline, incredible, Parents Magazine, The Chicago Tribune, among others. She also coaches, leads retreats, and when she is not traveling to attend events, she lives in Washington, D.C. with her spouse and her, I will say, because I've seen them all over social media, adorable kids. They are so stinking cute. Welcome, Randi. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Caroline. I cannot wait to have a conversation with you today.
Yeah, we are going to dive into some amazing things. So transparently, I have read your book twice now. First when it came out, and then more
Thank
recently
you.
to prepare for our conversation. And so I want to start off, let's go back to where this all began. And so you share a little bit of that and kind of your career journey in here, but if you can share with everybody who's listening and watching, how did your career come about? You were in the corporate world. Just give us a little backstory on all of that.
Yeah, so those are two different questions, right? Which is like, how did this life that I have today, where I run this women's leadership firm called Something Major, come together? That's one story. How did the book come together? That's another. Little backstory on me and my career. The two children I have now, who at the time of recording are about to start second and fourth grade, I had them almost a decade ago in 2 years and 6 days. And what happened was in that period of time, yes, Caroline just said, wow. Caroline, I know you just said it. I don't know if it was audible, but your face screamed wow. And that's the only appropriate answer to and so what happened was at a time when social science tells us that our earning plateau for women should, our earning potential for women should plateau or nosedive, I actually managed to double my compensation in those 2 years and 6 days. And so I certainly do not only work with moms by any means. But that was kind of the springboard because Caroline, where I live here in Washington, D.C., what people don't understand about D.C. is this is actually just the world's biggest small town. And so word got out about my story. People wanted my advice. Keep in mind, I also grew up professionally in sales. So in a lot of the circles I ran in, the group chats, the book clubs, I was the only person who had any experience negotiating. And what kind of became just a passion of mine, just seeing women thrive, became a hobby, became a little side hustle. Obviously, I trained, got certified as a coach, became what is now a thriving full-time business. And I say we because I have a whole amazing team. We just turned 5 years full-time a few months ago. And I'm thrilled to be here with you to talk about how women can thrive at work.
Yeah, and that's, I think, you go to go back to that statistic, and I spend so much time researching this because as women hit this plateau, it's funny because dads, when you start to have kids, their women plateau as moms, as dads, they actually continue to rise, and when they become dads, their income, it just continues to skyrocket. It's amazing.
So, and it's not just their income, Caroline, and this is really important because it's all related. There's great research from Cornell University that it's not just their income rate rises. But when dads like publicly parent in the workplace on the whole, their social capital goes up. So I'm married to an amazing man. When he takes my kids to the dentist, research shows that he is looked at in his workplace as more responsible, more credible. His social capital rises. I don't work in a corporate environment anymore, but I can tell you when I used to take my kids to the dentist, it was a production.
And what were some of the questions? Because I'm sure other women are going to relate to this. What were some of the questions, comments that people would say if you're like, I'm leaving at such and such a time today because my kids have to go to the dentist because cavities just aren't a great thing in our household?
Yeah. I mean, rather than say that, I'm going to give a piece of advice, which is I think a lot of times as women, something I see with my coaching clients a lot is like, we over explain in the name of trust and transparency, and we're actually just oversharing. Like literally, there's two ways to do it. If you, especially if you're in a position of leadership, if you want to put kids dentist on your calendar and put it on the calendar for everybody to see and make a big thing about how you're leaving early at 3 o'clock because you want to model that for other people on your team, have at it. I celebrate you. But we don't need to over explain. Like, you have the right to put a private appointment on your calendar and to simply say, if someone asks you, or to flag your bosses, hey, you might have seen I have an appointment blocked on my calendar. I have to pop to a doctor's appointment. Popping to a doctor's appointment could be you going to your own doctor's appointment, maybe taking your kid to your own doctor's appointment. I'm not saying, Caroline, that we need to hide, but at the same time, I think sometimes we overshare and it's like, it's not that deep. We don't need to educate everyone on our kids' orthodontia.
Okay, that is so true because even I run my own business as well, and I sometimes do that as well. Even to clients, I'll be like, I've been waiting to get to see a specialist for this, and it's like, it's okay. Like you're
Caroline,
allowed to go.
it's too much information. I was having this conversation a few months ago with a woman um, that I've known for years. She runs a very successful business, and she was telling me like it was Easter Friday, and she like sent this whole thing to her clients about like she's like this holiday's really important to me, and like my family's coming to town, we're hosting, and I was just like, you don't owe them any details. Like first off, you're allowed to take a day off. Secondly, like read the room. Like I don't even celebrate Easter, but it's just like anyone with a calendar in America knows it's Easter weekend. So it's like I don't think it's that controversial that you're taking off for Easter Friday, right?
Right.
So I think just sometimes like, and I talk about this a little bit in the book. I have a whole chapter on owning your message. I just think sometimes as women we like over explain, and it's just like sometimes a little bit of less is more, baby.
I love that. Okay, so now let's dive into the book. How did
Woo!
the book come about and this beautiful piece come to be?
So there were like kind of a few things, like Caroline, just like you, and I'm sure any of your listeners can relate. Like every time you do something really big, there's always been like some small things, like some small things that have been swirling around, and then like the big thing kind of like comes together. So there were a few things. Like number one, I've always loved to write. Number two was I run, like I said, a women's leadership firm called Something Major, and I run a writing monthly newsletter. Anyone who's listening can subscribe. Just go to somethingmajorcoaching.com and just scroll to the bottom. And what happened, Caroline, was in the early days of writing my newsletter, it was like I saw it jump from like 1,000 to 1,500, 1,500 to 3,000, 3,000 to 5,000. At the time of recording, we're about 10,000. And I was just like, huh, I really wish I could like talk to these people and communicate with them. And so I knew that, and I think this is something, Caroline, about goal setting that we take for granted is sometimes we don't know the thing it is that we want to do, but we know the thing it is that we want to be. Like I knew I wanted to be connected to my audience. And then as I share in the opening pages of the book, I was on the phone with a woman in a very, very cold January morning in like the deepest of deep COVID. This woman is working from home alone in her house, and yet she whispers to me on the phone. She says, Randy, I just have no desire. I can't even remember the last time I was in the mood. And for those of you who are listening, maybe with kids in the car, she was not talking about that thing. She was talking about her passion for work, right? She was talking about what I've come to call a case of low work libido. And Caroline, you know as well as I do, there's no little blue pill for that. And what I realized was like this woman had done everything right. Like there was something about that conversation, Caroline, where she just encapsulated all of the conversations I was having, not just with my clients, but with my girlfriends about all these women who had done everything right. Like she had made all the right moves. She even went to Harvard for graduate school. Like she was perfect on paper. She was stepping into this brand new role at this global company that you definitely know, your listeners definitely know. And she just like was feeling meh about it. And I realized, Caroline, that there were so many books written, and I'm sitting in my office, I see some of them here, when you are really languishing and you need like that kind of hardcore self-help stuff.
Mhm.
And then there's so many books about like advancing in business, but there was nothing that was written about what happens when you're a woman at work, a woman in business who's done everything right and something feels wrong. And so this book, Something Major, the new playbook for women at work, it looks at 10 core competencies that I want every single woman to feel empowered to rewrite your own new playbook on. Because Caroline, what you need is different than what I need. And as I write this, the final thing I'll say is, as I write in the opening pages of the book, like every single woman who picks up this book has a completely different lived experience. And so the tools in here are really designed to be more of a buffet than a prescription. And
Mm.
it's been 2.5 years since this book came out. And I get a DM at least once a week about a woman who's telling me how she used these tools. And she's different and she's using them differently. And that's just what I hope your listeners take away from our conversation, things that they can put into their own lives today.
Which is so funny because as you talk about those opening pages, that is what hooked me was when you talked about that whisper moment because I have had so many of these exact same women who are in these like high powered careers and they will like be on Zoom with me and they will literally lean into the camera and start whispering because
It's a
they
confession.
we talk to about money and they're like, "Do you think I'm making enough money?" And I'm like, "Are you with somebody? Like you've been talking like at that level." And so like when you said that, I was like, yes, I because I thought like people were just doing this with me. So to have that moment with you, I was like, oh my gosh, it's not just me that's seen this with that other women do this.
You know, it's so funny, Caroline, because you talk about women, like women in wealth. I talk about women at work. And what's the commonality there is like, if we were to draw a Venn diagram, besides the fact both involve cashing checks,
Yeah.
I would say what else lives in that Venn diagram is this idea about worthiness. Like, am I worthy to be successful? Am I worthy of enjoying my career? Am I worthy of what my stock portfolio says I'm worth? Am I worthy of aspiring to something my stock portfolio doesn't say I'm worth today, but that I want? And so that's why I love following your work too.
Thank you. That means so much to me. And especially like we've seen so much of this shift in the pandemic. So I appreciate too, it's interesting because this is a new playbook and so much of this has shifted since the pandemic. So
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I'm working on a book proposal right now for another book. And
get the
it
first
was funny
book.
because so much has shifted. And actually, like some of the notes back from my agent were like, you're actually talking too much about how things have shifted. But I'm like, but you don't understand. Like things have really shifted.
Okay, but if you
Yeah.
did you read actually the CNBC was covering it, but Microsoft just had the whole report that came out last week, and it talked about how we now have this never-ending workday, and so things have shifted so much and are continuing to do so as we see AI technology. I mean, we can go on and on and on, but as a result of the pandemic. So I want to hear all of your thoughts, everything you're working on. So please share how everything has shifted.
And I love AI. And I know you have so many things to ask me about the book. I just need to say this.
Oh,
I
please.
read something very troubling, and I couldn't believe that this was buried like in the middle of the newspaper because I still read in print on a Saturday of Memorial Day weekend. But this huge article that did not get a lot of pickup about the new gender gap is about the gender gap in AI, and that women are using AI 25% less than men at like all levels. And I don't want to botch the research. That was the gist of it. And maybe we can find the article and throw it in the show notes. But, and I was just like, oh my God, like it's all these little things. And it all comes around like, am I worthy? I have imposter syndrome, right? And it's like we're getting outpaced not just by men now, but by machines. So if you're listening and you've been intimidated by AI, this is your sign from the universe and from me. Like download ChatGPT, play around with it. It's going to blow your mind.
It is also so much fun for everything
I
from
just planned a whole vacation on ChatGPT. I'm loving it.
my entire summer vacation. A friend of mine, she and I are spending some time in Europe, and we're like, we're going to some smaller cities in Italy. We don't know what we want to do, and we're like, let's just put it into Chat GPT. Fantastic. We're thrilled. Like,
Chef's kiss.
we are giving you this permission slip right here to do it. And you make
Totally.
such a good point now. You're not just competing with the other people in the office, the other, men and women and everyone else. And now you're also competing with AI. So, and
Yeah.
I think as women, we probably also feel that I need to prove my worthiness now against all of these people and AI. No, use it to leverage how incredible you are.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. So now please share everything about the new book.
Yeah. So what the book is really about is, like I said, it's about 10 core competencies that I really want women to feel empowered to rewrite new rules on. Like I feel like we all grew up with an old playbook about like we should, like set really linear goals and we should have make sure that we have mentors and make sure they have sponsors. And Caroline, all those things are true. But what I found got lost in the conversation was that, like, as we as women were hit over the head about the importance of sponsors and mentors, which, again, let me underscore, extremely important. My career is what it is because other people saw my talent, cultivated it, bet on me. where there's also an underside of that, which is that like we're kind of taught to like turn down the volume on our own intuition. We're always looking externally for feedback, for validation to make sure that we're right. So it's like, how do you, it's not about blowing stuff up on the way you've always done it. It's about questioning about what do you believe? Is this story fact or fiction? And is it the story that you want to be writing? And so, like I said, we cover everything, not we, I cover everything in the book from owning your message to cracking the confidence code. And what I really tried to do, Caroline, was just make it human. I wanted to take the BS out of the conversation. I wanted to take the woo-woo out of the conversation. On the flip side, I want to take the pseudoscience out of the conversation. There is lots of research in this book, but I think sometimes we have a way of like making the conversation overly faux academic or making it totally like woo-woo. And I'm not here to, as my young kids would say, yuck anybody's yum. But I think we've lost an ability to keep it human. And I like to think that that's what this book did. And I think it's why this book resonated with so many people because there's a lot of BS out there and there's a lot of stuff that feels fluffy.
And it's funny going back to our AIs, so many people worry about that and losing the humanity side of things that will never be replaced because
Totally.
I love so much about what you're writing in here is it feels like people are having a conversation with you.
Oh,
And like, you and I didn't get to talk before this. And so, it's going to sound so creepy, but I felt like I knew you so much through this by reading the book, which I always think is so cool because then you get to see people before you even have a conversation with them because you understand their thought process and the stories that you share in here as well, both from clients that you've worked with, but also your own, which if you're comfortable talking about it as well. The one story when
happy to.
you were, how your career shifted before you went out on maternity leave. And then when you came back, like the response that you got from your boss and the way that that shifted, if you want to kind of shine more light on it as well,
Yeah.
um, that one kind of hit me in my core a little bit reading that one because it's one that we hear over and over and over again. And I think a lot of people's worst fear is that they're going to have a baby and then have this shift in the way they're treated at work. So I would love if you can share a little bit more about that as
I
well.
will definitely tell that story. And it's funny because I can tell you that what you said about reading the book and you feel like you know me. One thing I will tell you that is so funny is that I talk to so many people, I mean, who have thousands and thousands of people have read this book. And I meet them sometimes at an event, at a book signing, and they'll come up to me and we'll talk and they'll be like, oh my God, like you actually sound like your voice in the book. And I'm like, girlfriend, who do you think wrote the book? And so it is so funny that people are like, I feel like I know you, or like I share a lot of my life on social media. I try not to make LinkedIn, Instagram, but I just try and keep it real because I think there's a lot of, like I said, BS and fluff on the internet.
Yeah,
And
please
people
jump
come
in.
up to me, they'll be like, oh, I feel like I know you, or I feel like I like know your family. And so that's like a really fascinating dynamic, and it's fun. And if you listen and you see me somewhere, I love when people come up and say hi. So please do come up and say hi. So yeah, so the first three books, the first three chapters in the book are really, really meaningful to me. I mean, I would never say, Caroline, that I have a favorite chapter in the book because it'd be like saying you have a favorite child, but I have a very soft spot for them. And they're really all about cracking the confidence code. So the first one's about ditching perfectionism. The second, where this story comes from, is about untethering from external validation. And the third's about quieting the inner critic, that voice of self doubt and self judgment. And I think what really surprises a lot of people is that for a long time, I always say, like, I was addicted to external validation, like an actual legitimate addict. And I don't mean to offend anyone or to be flippant. If you're dealing with addiction in your life or in your family, like, I have also dealt with addiction in my family life. And so I would never say it to be flippant, but like truly it really did feel like an addiction. It's like I wanted it, the lengths I would go to, the fact that even now that I'm on the other side of it, there are moments where I'm like, oh my God, it's like I feel like I could relapse into the need for this. And what was so crazy is that, I went out on maternity leave, I came back, and it was like everyone's worst nightmare, like poof, like everything changed to the point where you start wondering, you start like gaslighting yourself. You're like, oh my God, like, is it me? Is it, am I the problem? And with no disrespect to Taylor Swift, it's the one thing she got wrong. Like, most of the time, the problem is not you. And I was just in my boss's office and she just laid into me and she was like, keep in mind I had spent so much time contorting myself through the years to fit into the mold of what I thought everyone wanted me to be. But I was always kind of like quirky at the same time. And so that was a big internal struggle for me. And she just in the middle of a check-in out of nowhere was like such like a swipe, like a character assassination. She's like, "You're just so inauthentic, and I find it totally grating." And I don't remember how the meeting ended. But what I do remember is her office was completely made of glass. And I went right to the elevator bank. And it felt like the longest, shortest elevator ride of my life to get down to the ground floor of this huge building and to walk all the way across the lobby um, into the gym. And I like basically like threw my key card while swiping it at the person at the desk. And I just went into the locker room and I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed into like one of those white gym towels. And it was such a rock bottom for me. Like when you talk about addiction, addicts need to face their rock bottom. And it was such a rock bottom for me because it was like, oh my God, like this person, like that they could say this about me, it was so off base, it was so wrong that it just shook me to my core about my worldview, about hanging my worth on what other people thought about me. And it was a real moment for me to really start questioning and undoing what I believed about external validation. And what I've learned, Caroline, that I'll share with your reader, pardon me, with your readers, with your listeners, my readers, your listeners, is that I believe that there are a few truths about feedback that have helped me take feedback for what it is without getting totally tethered to the other person's external validation. So, like, number one, feedback is a data point. It is not an immutable truth about who you are. It's a data point. Number two, feedback tells us a lot more about the feedback giver's preferences, priorities, values, biases than it does about us. I've seen this all the time with my clients, right? Where some of the things they bring to coaching, I remember one client in particular is telling me a story about a really tough stakeholder. And this was a Black woman. And I said to her, I was like, after hearing her story, Caroline, I was like, it's like, is it just me? Or like, does that sound kind of racist to you? And she's like, oh my God, I also thought it was racist, but I thought I was being too overly sensitive, but I felt it as a microaggression. I was like, yeah, right. So it's like the feedback. And for those of you who can't see, I'm like using big quotes that she got was technically on paper about her performance, but it belied and really showed a lot of her biases, right? And then also, feedback is very situational. When I get a piece of feedback, Caroline, whether it's from a person or an email or a non response to something, that's about me, that person, and a situation in one moment in time. And so I just want the women on this call to think about like, Caroline, I used to work for a company where one of our corporate values was sprint to criticism. Okay. So a lot of our conditioning makes us so hooked to external validation. And I hope that that's just one thing that women will feel empowered to write new rules on.
It's interesting because as you tell and share that story, even when I read it, as I'm even listening to you now, I think every single woman like can flash back to their own moment of when, like, whatever context and whatever moment that they had their version of it. And so now, like,
Totally.
I hope it's so helpful for everyone to now hear that and unpack and say, like, okay, that's right. Like that, whatever that person said to me, it was not about necessarily me in that moment. There were so many other things that were going on, and everything you just said in there, because everything is situational and there's so
Mhm.
much going on in these moments. And the fact that you had to have that rock bottom, like, I always say it's, I love looking back and seeing everything that's happened, and it's like, okay, a lot of these things, it's hard to see it, but had to happen for everything to be here now. And the fact, though, that I hate that that happened to you, but I'm thankful that you are able to use it to help someone.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yes. Wish you never had to go through it, and nobody ever does in the future, but at least
Listen, it made me who I am. Like everything that I've been through has made me who I am. And so there are things that sucked at the time, and I had no idea that moments where I cried into a towel in a corporate gym locker room would be such an important part of my origin story, or that would be in a book that was on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. Like if you had told the woman in that locker room that I would tell this story in a book, and then that book would be one of the few books ever written by a woman for women to be on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, I would like fall over or think you were on drugs and ask what you're taking because I really like that version of life.
Yeah, you'd be like, can I have some?
Can I
Or
have?
like, get that? Like,
Come on,
yes,
babe.
you'd be like, great, give it to me.
Yeah.
Something you also share in the book that I would love to, end our conversation on is it's actually in the introduction of the book, is you kind of give this recap and overview of where we are as women in leadership. And so you share that, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, that we actually lost a lot of women who were in the workforce. And another statistic that got me was that male executives still control 99 times more S&P 500 shares by value than women. So obviously, we spend a lot of time on this show talking about women building wealth, and I'd love to hear from your perspective. What are things that we can do to change this? And it's a two-part question, and why, from your perspective, is this so important?
Yeah, and I will answer that question. I'll just say what's popping into my mind is that at the time of recording, we're coming off the heels, Caroline, of the news that this viral story that broke corners of the internet that I hang out on, which is that the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders have secured a 400% raise. And I literally, hopefully, Caroline, it's up by the time this show goes live. I just filed an article for Forbes right before the weekend on this. And it brought back so many flashbacks for me of what we saw with like US women's soccer back in 2022, where they got this historic, and I put in big quote marks, raise. And the media was breathless and people went wild over it. And it actually, if you start to look a little bit more closely, number one, we're all the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders of our workplace. And number two, it's not good enough. So the Cowboys cheerleaders, they had to fight tooth and nail, risk their spots on the team. By the way, if anyone watched the Netflix show America's Sweethearts and you saw how physically grueling this job is, they still don't even get health insurance.
Yeah, and
And
this is
it's
not their only
just
job too, is the craziest part of all of
right,
it.
exactly. They to literally think I saw reporting that they make $15,000 to $20,000 a year adjusted, but for like 6 months out of the year, this actually like really is a full-time job for that. And even the chief brand officer for the Cowboys on Netflix, Caroline, says that part of their compensation is, and I quote, passion for dance. And this is just a story that's too common, whether it's women who are made board directors on paper, but don't actually have meaningful equity stakes in terms of like their influence over the amount of capital in the actual S&P 500, or these cheerleaders who had to fight, risk their spots on the team to not even get health insurance. It's like we live in a culture where women have to fight for the bare minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And then the media celebrates it when these benevolent organizations share it with us. And it's really disheartening. At the same time, I want to end us on an optimistic note. This is what I'm actually really optimistic about. Number one, the genie is just out of the bottle. Like there's been a cultural reckoning, and I know that we're recording at a really unique time, a really unique moment in our society. There's some of these things just cannot be put back inside. I personally, I say in the introduction to the book that my greatest wish is that, at the time when I wrote the book, my daughter was about to turn, oh my God, I think she was like 6.5, and now she's about to turn 9. And my greatest hope is that by the time she enters the workforce, that this book is completely irrelevant for her. So I think that we're slowly but surely moving in the right direction. And back to our point about allies and sponsors, like we need the allyship from men in our workplaces. We need men to support and to sponsor us and hype us. And we just need to keep talking about the data and the facts.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And I agree, right? I hope that these are conversations that people look back and they laugh on and be like, haha, remember like when they had to talk about these things, like I'm actually currently reading, obviously watched the movie when it first came out, but I'm actually now sitting down to read the book of RBG's entire story and history. We look back and we think and take, you don't take for granted, but realize how much she did during her lifetime. And you realize like that's not that long ago. And so
Yeah.
we have so much more still to do. And so I appreciate all of the work that you are doing. And I hope that we can see it for your daughter, for my daughters in the future. And I love to end on a final question with everybody. And that is, what is one thing that you do every day that makes you feel wealthy?
Oh, walk.
Ooh,
Literally, to me, the ultimate wealth, the ultimate freedom is having some unstructured time. And I walk every morning. There's a historic heat wave, and I literally walked at 5:52 this morning because I was not going to have my walk. But I'll leave you, Caroline, with something that the famous Jewish sage Hillel said, which was, "Who is wealthy? He who is happy with his lot." So I think there's a lot to be said for contentment and gratitude. And I'm very contented by our conversation and very grateful by the grateful for the opportunity, I should say, to spend this time with you and your audience.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on here. And Randy's book is available. Share with us everywhere they can connect with you. The best places to buy it that also supports you, because I always want to make sure I'm highlighting those places. Please share all of that.
Yeah. So here's where you all can find me. Find me on social media. I'm Randy with an I, and my last name is Braun, like the electric coffee maker, Braun, except I am not the heiress to the fortune. Otherwise, Caroline and I would be having a very different conversation. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Randy with an I, Braun. Also, I'm on Instagram, something major coaching. And then in terms of where you can get my book, bonus points if you can support a local bookseller, if you want to check it out from the library, or if you want to purchase something major, the new playbook for women at work, wherever it's convenient to you, please just buy it where it's convenient to you. And one ask I would have, Caroline, for your audience is if you read it and you enjoyed it, please do leave a review. I had no idea, Caroline, how important reviews are on Amazon or Goodreads until I wrote a book. So this has been lovely, and I just really hope that anyone who wants to learn more about my work can also just check out somethingmajorcoaching.com. There is no paywall on that website. There is no requirement to give me your email address, just gobs and gobs of free resources.
Yeah, and you also have some, I will say, everything is going to be linked in the show notes, and you have amazing articles that are on that website too that I
Oh, thank you.
many of. And so make sure you check all that out. And thank you again so much for being on here today. And once again, I hope this is one of these conversations that as much fun as I had, it becomes irrelevant down the line. So bye
From your
everyone.
mouth to God's ears. Thanks, Caroline.
Bye everyone.